Welcome everyone to what I've been told is lesson 39 of Japanese 101. It's very hard for me to keep track of the lesson numbers, especially because I'm now rapidly uploading the old parts to YouTube and hopefully catching up soon. Those of you who follow that have probably noticed that there have been a lot of uploads. Yeah, this is lesson 39. Today, I wanted to take some time and discuss a few more auxiliary verbs. We're now at a point where we've discussed a lot of like basic grammar, so we can sort of talk some more about like specifics, and maybe that's the direction I'm going, is more like picking specific topics that are interesting to talk about. I think most of the like really broad topics we've probably covered in one way or another. There's still a lot that I haven't talked about, so that's good. But today I just want to, I just cherry picked like a few auxiliary verbs that I would like to talk about. So let's hop in, okay? Without further ado. To caught up, it should be easy again though, good incentive. Yeah, oh yeah, look at that, a subscription. Wait, I'll use the time while it plays to drink. Karaoke is an empty orchestra. Karaban is an empty van. Yes, exactly. Yep, you make a good point. Yes, that's, yeah, sounds about right? So, first of all, let's quickly, I won't want to spend a lot of time on this, but let's quickly actually talk about what an auxiliary verb does. So, today we're just going to talk about auxiliaries, okay? Not auxiliaries in general, we're going to talk about a few specific ones. Auxiliary, I hope I'm spelling that right. Verbs. And we're going to talk about ones attaching, not like that, attaching to renyoke, okay? So auxiliary, double L, okay? Auxiliary. Attaching to must stem, okay? Also called renyoke must stem. That's the ones I want to talk about today. There's generally like two categories of aux verbs, okay? You have, that's the big ones, right? You have aux verbs, aux verb with te form, and you have aux verbs that attach to the must stem. That's like the two big ones. I think, let me think. I think that is the only way in which you can attach auxiliary verbs. Hey Nana, how are you doing? Must stem, okay? I'm trying to think, I think, right? Because te form and must stem is usually the only way where you can make verbs like conjunctive, and conjunctive means you can add another clause or another verb. So it makes sense, like when you add auxiliary verbs, usually you either do it to add it on the te form. So examples of this would be stuff we've talked about, like te miru, right? Or te kuru. We've talked about these. And aux verbs that add to the must stem are ones such as hajimeru. We won't talk about, we're not going to talk about hajimeru today, maybe if we have time, but that's not the one I have planned. Today we're actually going to talk about how to say that something is easy or hard, and we're also going to talk about, what's the other one? I have two topics that I want to do. Right, we're also going to talk about sugiru, which means too much of something. I feel like we can do these. So we have, generally, you had like hajimeru, right, would be an example. That's a really ugly there. Bit better, hajimeru, etc., right? So here it would be like the verb in must form, and here we have the te form. That's basically it. Now, real quick, okay, just so we're on the same page, an auxiliary verb, by definition, is just a verb that is used to modify another verb, okay? I hope you know what a verb is. If you don't know what a verb is, maybe you should go watch some of my earlier lessons where I think in the very first lesson that I did, I explain as best as I can, like what is a verb, what is a noun, what is an object, and stuff like that. But I'm assuming you know it's a doing word, right? An action word. So today we're just gonna talk about a few of these auxiliary verbs. I'm actually gonna get rid of this title because I want to split up the titles a little bit more specifically, and I want to talk about first, like easy or hard. Yeah, what is a verb? A doing word, an action word. So yeah. Today we're going to talk about a few of these. Now, actually, I should say that I should say that the first class we're going to talk about are actually called auxiliary adjectives. But they work the same way, so there's not really there's not really much of a need to worry too much about it. So maybe a bit more correct would be talking about auxiliaries in general. But auxiliary is anything that just kind of attaches to the verb and modifies the way it works. So we're actually going to talk about how to express that as something is like easy slash hard slash difficult to do first. That's what we're going to talk about first. And there is actually Moritz already posted them in chat, at least 2 of them. There is, broadly speaking, 3 auxiliary adjectives, and they're called auxiliary adjectives because they are both auxiliary, meaning they attach to a verb and modify it, and they're also adjectives, and they're e-adjectives actually. So there is, broadly speaking, 3 of those that you can use to express whether something is difficult for you or whether something is easy for you, okay? And on the easy side, it mostly boils down to attaching yasui. Yasui, which you can see here, acts like an e-adjective, okay? E-adjective ends in e, it acts like an e-adjective, it works like an e-adjectives. Waga hai. 難しいですね. Yeah, so you have yasui. And on the difficult slash hard side, I will use like word hard and difficult. I do not mean hard as in like a hard object. I mean hard as in difficult. So maybe I will just default the word difficult so that it's more clear. So difficult. Difficult. Here you have 2 options, broadly speaking. You have either Nikoi or you have Zurai, okay? These are, broadly speaking, like your 2 options here. Again, both of these work like e-adjectives, which means that also if you wanted to conjugate them, are these different from adverbs? They are different from adverbs in as much as their positioning is different, but their function is a little similar. Auxiliary in grammar now. I'm kind of just talking based on what I know, but auxiliary in grammar usually means that it is like added onto the verb, literally, whereas adverbial just means that it pertains to the verb. So when you have something that is adverbial, it means, gatai. So gatai, we'll mention that gatai is basically nothing other than the formal version of nikoi. So yeah, when you have an adverb, it modifies the verb, but it isn't like, it isn't as much part of it. Generally, auxiliaries in Japanese are also added at the end of verbs. They're added to either the must stem or the te form, whereas adverbs are just their own thing in the sentence, right? So that's mainly the difference with auxiliary verbs and auxiliary adjectives. They are just, they're like fused with the verb itself generally. They cannot be separated in that regard. So that's like the main difference. They both function to kind of modify the way we interpret the verb, but yeah, they are, the way they manifest are a little different. So yeah, nikoi, zurai, and then I'll, because, who was it? So yeah, Fan This Slick brought that up. So nikoi and gatai are the same thing for the most part, just that gatai is like pretty formal and like written language or just formal language. Like you wouldn't really use it in casual conversation much. Like gatai. There you go. Okay. Thank you. Also, maybe we'll get to that in a bit, but gatai is where we get arigato from. Maybe I can mention that when we have some time. Yeah, it's from arigatai. So, easy, difficult. Now, that doesn't have to do anything with how easy or difficult it is to memorize these. It just means that for when you mean that something is easy, you will use yasui. When you mean something is difficult, you will use nikoi or zurai. And we're going to talk about all these differences. But first, let us focus in on yasui and actually how we use it and how it works. Because I've said a lot, but I haven't really shown you that much yet. So to make it a little bit easier, let's just focus in on the usage of yasui. I'm getting happier with the way my su looks, by the way. This looks a lot better than it did in the past. Anyways, yasui. Okay, so the kanji that you would usually use for this auxiliary, or by the way, this yasui also theoretically works as its own e-adjective, like a standalone e-adjective. Statue, you mean? The praying woman in Sekiro. Nice indeed. Been working on that su. So let me see if this will show up. Hopefully, there we go. Easy. Oh, that's the wrong tab. There we go. So the way this works is that yasui is actually this kanji, and yeah, it means easy. It literally means easy. So you also probably know the word yasui like this. Note that this is a different word for the most part. We kind of treat this as a separate word, meaning cheap or calm, peaceful. And then when we mean easy, generally for easy, we will either use no kanji or we will use specifically this kanji. Okay. Is it different writing with a stylus? Not really. It feels fairly similar to writing on paper. I have the advantage of being able to turn on some amount of smoothing in Photoshop, which helps my stroke look less jittery. So there's that. There's like a little bit of an advantage. So the kanji for this would be yasui like this. Oh gosh. I guess yeah, I guess you're supposed to put that stroke more like below, huh? Kind of like that. So yeah. This would be the kanji version, okay? As an auxiliary verb, you normally don't use the kanji, right? Yeah, so generally you wouldn't use the kanji here, but you can. And also, again, these aren't really... I kind of set this, or I kind of planned it. I didn't plan it wrong. I kind of didn't put that in the title, but theoretically we would count these more as auxiliary adjectives, similar to how we would treat tai, right? Like, I want to. If you remember, we talked about tai. Tai works like an auxiliary, but it works as an adjective rather than a verb. That's basically the difference there. So for this one, yasui, generally you would see it in kana, but you see it sometimes in kanji, and it is not wrong to use it in kanji as well. Thank you for following, Karuon. So yasui means easy to do, and we said earlier that you added to the mas stem. Quick repetition, we always, I mean, every time this comes up, I repeat it. Mas stem is just the verb in mas form without the mas, okay? So if we have taberu, do you scale the size? I don't know what you mean. We have tabemasu, right? Which looks like this. Tabemasu. Now, the mas stem is simply this, but with the mas removed. Another example would be, for example, I guess, arukimasu, right? So, aruku is like this. Wait, I hope I'm not. My brain isn't lagging. That is aruku, isn't it? Yeah, it's not. Because this is the same thing. It should be, it's actually sho below that. Sorry, there you go. There you go. Almost, Eve, almost. Aruki mas. Close enough, alright? Close enough. My brain was lagging a little bit. Arukimasu, note the ki changing from ku to ki, that is the mas conjugation. Remove the mas, and you have the mas stem. That's it. Okay, this is true for every verb. The mas stem is always the mas form without mas. That's why it's called the mas stem, because it's where you add mas. I always use nomu and taberu. Yeah, those are two good examples as well. So we have mas stem, and like I said earlier, it is simply a matter of attaching the auxiliary after this, in this case. You never, okay, this is all the other thing. You never use te form, in this case, for yasui or zurai or nikoi. You always use the mas stem, never te form. That's just how it is. I don't know. I have thought about this in the past. What is the difference? Like, if there is any sort of like rule for when you add something to the te form and when you add something to the mas stem. But honestly, I I haven't really found an answer to that. It just happens that some auxiliaries like to stick to the te form, and some auxiliaries like to stick to the must stem. It just seems to be like that. Shut up, new phone. Just because you're new doesn't mean you get to interrupt my stream. In the case of Yasui, Nikoi, Zurai, they all attach to the must stem, so it would look like this. I think you're actually supposed to do this stroke over here first, but it's easier for me to do the other one first. Yasui, okay? Tabe yasui. Tabe yasui. What does this mean? Well, means easy to eat. To eat. Easy to eat. Like it's not difficult, it's easy to eat. Tabe yasui. This is actually something you might hear when someone wants to express that food is like you know, it's easy to eat. It's like it's not a difficult kind of taste, you know? Like people would maybe say that like natto would be a good example of something that isn't like easy to eat. It's like kind of this divisive, right? But you have some foods that are just really inoffensive. It's just like, for example, I don't know, like a piece of bread is generally easy to eat if it's not super dry or whatever. So yeah, tabeyasui can be used in different contexts. It can be used to different effect, but it really just means easy to eat. There's no one true way in which we can interpret this, but that's just language. So this is enough already. I am being very much interrupted by my phone. Stop. There we go. Soup is not easy to eat. Soup is very easy to eat. But again, it depends on your definition. So that's how you do yasui, okay? You can add it to any must stem. So let us move straight along to example sentences, which will more clearly illustrate the usage. So let's draw a little text box here. Maybe make it this big. I need to select the font that I need, which is this one. Good thing I already know which font that I use, else this would be annoying. So, for example, we can use this one. Very tender steak. Yeah, you drink soup in Japanese, so it's easy to eat. Yeah, I guess. Okay. So, for example, we could have this sentence. そのペンは、とても書き。I'll go with the sentence. あの山は闇。あの山は登りやすい。登りやすい。Okay. 登りやすい or we can also look at some conjugations in a bit. So, あの山は登りやすい。This mountain is easy to climb. 下がないと食べづらい。確かに。So what does this mean? It's straightforward. It's just saying this mountain or that mountain, right? あの山. To put some furigana, I guess. 山は登りやすい. Again, we have must stem here. Oops, keep hitting the F key. That's not really intended. We have the must stem here. Nobori from noboru, which means to climb something, and yasui meaning that it's not hard to do. It's easy. So this mountain is easy to climb. Now let's see in which ways that yasui basically behaves like an e-adjective. Well, it's pretty simple. It behaves like an e-adjective in basically every single manner that we could think of it. So to illustrate that, let's just change the sentence. Let's conjugate. I guess you would say conjugate, or let's change the I guess it would be an inflection or whatever. I'll say conjugate. You know what I mean. If conjugate isn't the right word to use here, then please spare me. I think it may not be. I think there is a, what's the general term to, I think words inflect, right? Inflect or inflection is the general term for changing a word, but I forgot. Anyways, it does also not matter that much. You all understand what I mean when I say conjugate. So, just like any e-adjective, if you forgot how to do e-adjectives, I have a lesson on that. We can just, instead of yasui, we can say yasukunai. Yasukunai. The bitten one, hello. Hello, friend. Ano yama wa nobori yasukunai. Well, now it's just a negative. It is not easy to climb this mountain, or this mountain is, or that mountain over there is not easy to climb. Nobori yasukunai, right? It's just a negative. then we can also chain things, because it's adjectives. We can make a conjunctive out of it, and we can chain another clause. So 登りやすくて, comma, ellipses, right? The sentence goes on. Let me put proper there. 登りやすくて something something, just like an adjective. We can make a conjunctive, we can make it into te form of adjectives, and now we have a conjunctive and the sentence can go on. あの山は登りやすくてとても登りやすくてとてもいい景色 or something like that. Or 登りやすくて上天からすごくいい景色が見えます. Something like that. The mountain is easy to climb and the view from the top is very beautiful. Something like that, right? It doesn't matter. We can do everything that an adjective can do. So we can take the phrase 登りやすい and we can treat it basically like an adjective. Another thing that we can do is add a verb at the end. 登りやすい山です. This is a bit pleonastic, but it's not wrong. It's correct. あの山は登りやすい山です. I'm saying yama twice, so it's a bit redundant, but it is grammatically perfectly fine to add another noun after this adjective, because that's what adjectives do. So there you go. Same thing is true for adding this. You can add this, just like you can add this to any adjective. You should also not add da. Adding da is bad, just like any other adjective. So don't do this. Yasuida is not good. So no adding da, because just like any other adjective. You'll hear me say this a lot today. The phrase just like any other adjective, because that's really how it works. So it's okay to add no da or nda, but don't add da without anything in between. This here is not grammatically correct, because usually you can't add da to adjectives. As your junibyo, even if you're junibyo, there's more things you get in mind than that. So that's basically that. So the adjective part is fine with te. I'm not quite sure what you mean with that. Can you be more specific? Maybe give an example of what you think. So yeah. There we go. Okay, so that's yasui, right? And it's just used to express that something is easy. They're noborite. Well, noborite would be the classical way of making the te form. So I'm not sure if I've talked about this in the past, but theoretically, right? In modern Japanese, we have nobori, which is the must stem, and we have no, I'm running out of space here. There. And we have nobotte. Okay? Nobotte, which is the te form. There. In classical Japanese, actually the te form was just a must stem with the auxiliary te. So it looked like this. But this here is not really used anymore. The only place where you'll see it is in like older texts or in games where they purposefully want to make something seem older. They will use maybe noborite. But generally no one uses this anymore. So you will very, very rarely see this. I don't think that it would be correct to add yasui to noborite. I don't know for sure though, but we're getting more into like more classical Japanese. So yeah, I don't know. You'll have to ask someone who's an expert in that. What I can tell you though is that no one will say nobotte yasui. It's always nobori yasui. It's basically always the must form, the must stem for adding yasui, nikoi, and zurai. Nikoi and Zurai are coming up. Thank you for the follow. Ahora, Aloha Shogun Channel. Oh, Shogi. これShogun じゃなくてShogi なんじゃないですかね。Thank you for the follow. フォローありがとうございます。I read that as Shogun, but I think it's Shogi. 泳いで登りやすい. Oh, that is fine. You can add, you can have a sort of conjunctive thing there. Now, the sentence 泳いで登りやすい is a bit weird because it means like I swim and it is easy to climb. We're kind of missing. There's kind of a conflict of subjects there. So you have to keep in mind that you still need things to make sense. So in the sentence 泳いで登りやすい, we're kind of like, wait, what's the subject of that sentence? Is it me swimming and I'm the one who's easy to climb? It doesn't really compute, but yeah. I don't know what else to do with a mountain other than climb it. Yeah, but yeah. So add a noun to it and say, あの山は登りやすいところがいっぱいある. Yeah, for example, you have that. Maybe it's swimming up the mountains. Maybe there's a lake at the top. But you still have this issue with the ambiguity of the subject. So you should at least like add in a clarification for what is the subject. So yeah, it's a bit... theoretically, that should work, but it can get a bit confusing because theoretically, noboriyasui functions more like an adjective than it does like a verb. Even though it is an action, but it's usually, noboriyasui is usually pertaining to describing some sort of noun. For example, in our case, yama, we are describing the mountain to be easy to climb. Thank you for the resub, Taco. Welcome back. 4 months. Why do people happy? この山はそもそも難しいけど登りやすくなる. Oh, yeah, I guess you could have that. That would be like 2 clauses there. So there we go. So generally when you would have a te there, a te form, either it's one that's completely disconnected and just acts as an and, or it would have to at least pertain to the same subject so that it would make sense, in my opinion. We can probably find examples. We can talk about examples, but yeah. Okay. Let's look at one more example of yasui, but then let's move on. So yasui is pretty easy because it just means easy. Like, wakariyasui desho? It's easy to understand, right? Hello, Ayafumi. I'm not sure if I said hello already, but there you go. Ayafumi-san, konnichiwa. Another example that we could look at would be something like... Yeah, motomoto would be better. I would use... Well, somo-somo. Yeah, so somo-somo, because you are contradicting yourself. So it's like, あの山はもともと難しいけど、because そもそも sounds like you want to have something that agrees with the first statement following. So like when you say like, he's already, you would say something like, the mountain was already hard to climb and now they're making it even harder. Then it's that. Are you friends of the anime man? No, I don't personally know Joey. I just like know him from his videos, but I've never talked to Joey personally. Shiroi. So, oh, this is another sentence that would be good. アニメマンの放送で見たような気がしたけど勘違いでしたか。やはりそうなのではないでしょうかね。I think that would be the case indeed. 白いシャツは汚れやすい. This is another example. ご上手ですね。ありがとうございます. Thank you. I try very hard. Let me do this. This would be another example. Very simple. Oops, I didn't actually want to add another text box. Oh gosh. The eternal pain of accidentally adding text boxes. This is another sentence. Shiroi. So I hope you know shiroi. I guess I can furigarize it. It doesn't really cost me that much time. 白いシャツは、汚れやすい. This just means that white shirts are easy to stain. 汚れる means to get dirty or to stain. So, 白いシャツは汚れやすい. White shirts are easily stained. They easily get dirty. That's basically it. さんじゃないですか. It's a lot of R's. Let's move on, okay? I want to talk about Nikoi and Zurai next. So, let's get rid of this. And then let's go here. Next, we're going to talk about how to express that something is hard to do or difficult to do. So we have 2 words for this. We have one of which is... Let me do this. One of which would be Nikoi, and the other one would be Zurai. Okay? So we have... adding Nikoi. It's kind of an ugly E. A little better, right? Nikoi and Zurai. Zurai. Zurai here is always spelled with dakten. I mean, probably has some historical reason why, but in this case, when you add Zurai, it just happens that you will always like add z. Thank you. Zurai, you always spell it like this. Zurai, I mean, it probably has rendaku reasons, but yeah, now whenever you add it, it's just this zurai. It's pronounced like z in standard Japanese. Or in Tokyo accent, there is not really a difference between, like in Tokyo accent, it's basically the fact that z is equal to z, okay? Some accents differentiate. If I were you, I wouldn't worry about it and just pronounce them the same, because you'll be fine, at least in Tokyo. And even, I mean, a Tokyo accent is probably what you're trying to acquire anyways, so yeah, don't worry about it, basically. So we have Zurai. How do you duct and tsu on keyboard? You type either du should do the trick. I think sometimes dzu, but du should do the trick. If you wanna, by the way, if you wanna add duct and to chi, then di would be the way to do it. Okay, so Nikoi and Zurai. This one, Nikoi, will actually use the kanji for muzukashi. So in kanji, this will look like this. Right, it's only just a box, and then we have, right, and then a turkey. You can tell I've done Heisig at some point because I still call this guy a turkey. So Nikoi would look like this, and Zurai would look like this. Right, and then we have this guy under it, Zurai, kind of like this. Anyway, so these would be the kanji. Thank you for the follow. Aoya. It's hard to say. This would be the kanji. The same thing is true that I said about Yasui, that you might sometimes see. Thank you. You might sometimes see these kanji used, but they're not generally used much for Zurai and Nikoi as auxiliaries. I said Nikoi, kind of weird. Nikoi. So yeah, just you might see them, but generally they aren't used, so don't worry too much about it. Now, Zurai by itself, like this, can actually also be just tsurai, like this, tsurai, and is actually its own word as well. Nikoi is also its own word, but Nikoi is not used as its own word as much, but tsurai definitely is. You have probably seen tsurai before. Not karai, tsurai. So tsurai, painful, bitter, heartbreaking, difficult, tough, hard, usually tsurai, okay? So this is used pretty common. So you're like, so that must be quite hard. Generally, when we use tsurai, tsurai by itself, we will use it without the dukten. So we'll just say tsurai. Would always be read as karai to me, I think. Yeah, it would be. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Generally, people purposefully what soiled body pillow. That's an interesting name. But yeah, what they bring up is a good point. Generally, to differentiate between karai and tsurai, people will write tsurai in kana and karai in kanji. So there's that. You can also write both in kana to be really clear. So yeah, when you use tsurai by itself, it will be tsu rather than zu. When you have it as a suffix, it's zu. That's just kind of how it is. It probably has historical reasons why the suffix version became zu only. Whatever. Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you for the follow. So there's that. Now, Nikoi, the issue of Nikoi is that you can use it, but it's when you see this without anything else, I would most of the time read it as katai, okay? And Nikoi is considered only like an adjective, it's only like suffix use. So Nikoi with this kanji, okay? Nikoi with this kanji isn't really used by itself. It is only really used as a suffix. When it's not a suffix, I would read it as katai, okay? There is another Nikoi, but it's a completely different word. Nikoi here meaning hateful, abominable, etc. And this is used by itself as well. But it is never written with the muzukashi kanji. So there's not really any overlap there. So yeah. In short, okay? In short, you're probably not going to see Nikoi by itself meaning difficult. If you do see this by itself, it's probably katai. You will see this, but it could probably be karai. And you might see this by itself, tsurai, which could also be the same kanji. and that will usually mean it's tough or hard or whatever. And when it's used as a suffix, you will use the zu instead of the tsu, okay? There's a bit, listen, I hope this is clear. This is just some added information, okay? But now let's actually get to the important part, and that is, how are they different, okay? Are these the same? What is the difference? They both mean difficult. I can't spell. They both mean difficult. They both mean that something is hard, but hard or difficult to do. The main difference between Nikoi and Zurai is that Zurai can only really be applied when it's like subjectively difficult. So subjectively. Do you spell subjectively with an E or without an E? I think it's, well, subjective is with an, ugh, I don't even know. Some words have E's and some don't. It's subjectively difficult, okay? It's subjectively difficult, which means it is difficult to you. Subjective, of course there's no E. Yeah. Subjective. I think I'm like confused because in French, and I had to take a lot of French in school, there's like always an E at the end. Whatever. No, there is an E. There is an E? Damn it, I feel so cheated. Listen, subjectively. Anyways, I'm not gonna change it anymore, okay? I don't care what's right anymore. Subjectively difficult, which means that for you specifically, there is like an emotional or well, generally there's like an emotional or a specific reason why it is difficult for you. So maybe it makes you uncomfortable, or maybe it's like something you really don't like doing. So let's make an example of like tabezurai, for example. Oh, and also Nikoi is more neutral. Nikoi is just like the neutral slash objectively difficult, right? So Nikoi is just used for, well, it's just difficult, but there is less of an emotional connection. Zurai can only be used when there is like a subjective reason for the speaker for why it is difficult, right? Like there's like some sort of subjective circumstance that makes it difficult. Without knowing even thinking about the difference between them and whole life, now you've made it clear. Yeah, this is like, a lot of people don't think about it. Especially native people don't have to think about this, you just know. So like as a native, right? If I say a sentence like, 例えば、how about this? 丈夫でこうじゃない。Wait, there was a good sentence here. Yeah, maybe this one. 最後のずらいですかちょっと。このコップはプラスチック製なので割れづらいです。ちょっとなんか不自然に感じます。まあ記事によってね。I think for Japanese people, you'll just like know, like, this sounds weird, or this doesn't sound weird. And a speaker can't make a decision about something. Yeah, that's a good example, because it's difficult because there is an emotional reason why it is difficult, right? So let us actually look at an example. For example, if we have some thing, some X object, and you can say like, 食べづらい, right? I always use 食べる. I shall be excused for overusing このコップは. I think it's fine, but usually you probably say 割れにくい rather than 割れづらい, except if there's like some sort of emotional reason for why you're attached to the cup. But so let's make an example, right? So when you have some food, right? This is some type of food. Oops. Some type of food. 食べにくい. Now, you can say that X は食べにくいです or whatever, and it just means like, well, this is hard to eat. There could be many reasons for why you say this. Maybe it's bread and it's hard, and you're like, これ食べにくいね. Something like that, right? 食べにくいですね. It's like, this is kind of hard to eat because, I don't know, the bread is dry or whatever. That would just be like kind of a neutral or objective statement. It's just like, well, this is just hard to eat. It's not easy to eat. There could be many reasons. Maybe it's too big. Like, if there's like a burger and the burger is this big, you're like, これ食べにくいよ. Like, it's too big. I can't even like bite into it. There's like a clear objective reason for why it's hard to do. on the other hand, if we say 食べづらい 食べづらい so 食べづらい that also means it's hard to eat. However, it sounds more like there's like a personal reason. So maybe you just don't really like X. Like the food here, the X food, maybe you just hate that food, which makes it hard for you to eat. But there is a sort of personal connection, right? It took me a good 2 minutes to remember gatai, because I've only seen it like twice in the stick in here as well. Nikoi and Zurai. Gatai doesn't show up as much, to be fair. It's mostly like in very formal contexts. So when you have Xは食べづらいです it would be like, if you have nekojita, things are 食べづらい or 食べにくい. It depends. Like something that is very hot could just be objectively hard to eat, but if you're very sensitive, it is also 食べづらい. There is not like a clear line. Most of the time, there isn't like a clear line that you can draw where one is wrong and one is correct. But it is true that づらい emphasizes the personal connection or the emotional like reasoning for why it's difficult more. So it depends on what you want to say. I think it just depends on messenger. Exactly. It depends on what do you want to communicate. There isn't really a right or wrong. It's not odd to see in the practice both are conflated as one, right? Well, more or less. Often, most of the time, both are translated the exact same way. But it really boils down to what is it you're trying to say. Like, the impression that I get when you say 食べづらい is a little bit different than the impression that you get when you say 食べにくい. Like, that's about it. Like, there's not like a world's difference there. It's more like you send a different impression, basically. So like, are you trying to say, this is for me, like, this is difficult to eat because there's some sort of reason? Or are you saying this is just difficult to eat and the other person should probably also understand why? So yeah. I found an article about this online. So here it says, 実は、づらいは、話者が意図的に、意図的にある行為をすることを難しく感じるときに使います。Which means that, like, づらい... Oh, thank you so much for the subscription, Body Pillow. ありがとう。サブありがとうございます。It means... Let me actually copy this sentence into this little thing here so that we can look at it, right? This is the explanation that they give. Wahoo naoto. Thank you. Yes, it's true. It's a very Japanese sound. That's what I was going for. I have been thinking of doing a different sub sound though. There. 実は、づらいは話者が意図的にある行為をすることを難しく感じるときに使います。That's, you can have many different explanations for this. This is one I found. And here they say, in truth, づらい is used when the speaker, 話者 is the speaker, right? When the speaker, like consciously, 意図的に means consciously, 意図的に, right? It's 意図的に, not 意図的に. Right. 意図的に means consciously, when they consciously find some sort of action difficult to do, or they feel that it is difficult to do. That's when you would use づらい rather than にくい, basically. Okay. Now, I don't want to go too deep. This is just, this is on this website if you want to read it. It is a Japanese article. Oh, also, there is a typo. There is a typo in this article. この記事にはね、一つだけっていうか、今まで見つかったのはこの1個しかないんだけど、その、誤字がありますね。これですね。同じような例文をもう一つ見ておきましょう。この奥という漢字は間違ってるね。正しくは奥ですよね。It should be 奥. But other than that, the article is fine. I think this is a typo because you don't say 見ておきましょう. Anyways, alright. But now let's look at some examples of Nikoi and Zurai and then kind of figure out how that all works, okay? I will go back here and grab some examples. Oku, that is. 9 out of 10 would be written in kana. Yeah, 9 out of 10 times, but also 10 out of 10 times, it shouldn't be okoru. It should not be like the one that they had. How about this one, right? So here we have an example that would be 考えにくいと思います. This would be an example of using nikui. Let's do one with zurai. 字が薄くて読みづらいです。There we go. Nikoi Zurai. Yeah, there we have another article. Feel free to read these as well. The Japanese articles on this topic are generally pretty easy to understand and grasp, and they will do a pretty good job on like contrasting the two. So yeah, I would recommend you go check that out. Okay, can I switch my layer again? Thank you. So we have 2 example sentences here. This one is 考えにくいと思います. I guess more, right? I keep doing more like this, but actually sorry, I keep doing this. Or which one? Wait, you're supposed to do this, right? Yeah, you're supposed to do this, but I keep doing the other one. Anyways, doesn't matter, all right? It really doesn't matter. 字が薄くて読みづらいです. Okay, these 2 sentences, very simple. 考えにくいと思います. I think this is hard to think. I think that is hard to consider. This could mean a few different things in terms of nuance depending on the situation. Hard to believe, something like that, right? So for example, when someone is 当て字読みにくくて辛い意味深い yeah. In this sentence, 考えにくいと思います could sort of, the nuance could be a few different things depending on the situation in which you use it. But for example, if someone brings up an idea and says like, maybe it's that, you could say 考えにくいと思います. You're like, that's hard to believe. Like I don't think, like that's kind of hard to think that way. Like it is objectively a leap of logic to think that way. You can also use 考えにくい as in it's hard to consider. So, for example, you say like, maybe it was that person who did something, or like 考えにくい, like that's hard for me to consider that, something like that. And then 字が薄くて読みづらいです. 字が薄い here means like the letters are faded. So again, it could depend. It could also mean like, well, 薄い with this kanji it means like faint. So the writing is faint. 読みづらいです. It's hard to read. Now, would it be wrong to say 読みにくい? No, it would be correct. 読みにくい is fine, right? If the reading is like just really hard to read, then you could say 読みにくい because it's just objectively hard to read. But when we say 読みづらいです, we focus more on the fact like, I can't read this, like it's hard for me to read because maybe I'm not used to it, and like someone else who's used to it might be able to read it more easily. But again, not to say that 読みにくい would be wrong in this case. It's mostly just a choice on what we want to focus on. So yeah, if anything, the difference would maybe be that in 読みづらい, I might translate that it's difficult for me to read this, and 読みにくい, I would maybe say it's difficult to read. Where in English, adding the for me makes it more personal, whereas just not adding it makes it more general. But other than that, there's really not much of a difference. Okay? All right. That's Zurai and Nikoi. One more thing. So does Nikoi Zurai effectively turn the verb into a noun or something? Sorry, I stated that already. I mentioned that in the beginning. It doesn't turn it into a noun, but it turns it into an e-adjective, basically. So for all intents and purposes, the whole unit of verb plus auxiliary here turns into an e-adjective. And it can be treated as one. So yeah, and so this 思います 考えにくい basically behaves like an e-adjective. And can be conjugated as such. You can theoretically use 読みづる yomi or 考えにくい. You can theoretically use that as an adverb as well, or an adverbial. So you could say something like grammatically this would be fine. You could say something like 考えにくく感じる or something like that, right? So I guess 感じる 考えにくく感じる. It's a bit of a forced example, but grammatically speaking, this is perfectly fine. We conjugate nikui into nikuku, and now it is an adverb. And we use the adverb to describe kanjiru. So it feels to me like it is hard to consider, right? Like, it's a bit of a forced example, but grammatically speaking, this is perfectly fine. And you will see this sometimes. So yeah, these end up behaving like adjectives. Actually, I was thinking of talking about sugiru, but maybe we will actually save this for another lesson, since we're already coming up on almost an hour, and I don't want to get too chaotic. And if it gets too long, it's like too much. So I will rather, what I will do is, I will quickly talk about gatai, and then we'll probably say the lesson's about done there. Sugiru we can do either next time or another time. I think there will be time. So let's talk about gatai real quick so that we get that out of the way. And then I have some interesting bit, I guess, about how we get from arigatai to arigato, and then I think we can call it there. Yes. So first of all, for the most part, using nikui is more or less equivalent to using gatai. Just that gatai is considered pretty formal and maybe a little bit old-fashioned. So you will primarily see nikui, and sometimes you will maybe see gatai. When gatai is used, it is pretty common to see it in kanji. So you are not unlikely to see this. Gatai. Okay, you're not unlikely to see this as gatai. Again, it's mostly like a formality thing these days. Kangai ni kanjiru. Okay. So, nikui and gatai mostly work the same way. They also have this sort of like subjective difficulty sort of vibe to them, I guess. So, also, the verb arigato, right? We actually get arigato from aru, which is to have, to possess, which is usually... Didn't we learn last time that you're supposed to spell, that you're supposed to write the kanji aru like this, right? But like, I feel like I wouldn't want to do it, but yeah. I think that's the correct stroke order for aru, but it's so much easier for me to do it like this. So I will stick to that. Aru, meaning to have. It's to have or to possess. Okay, aru. To have or to possess turns into arigatai, right? Difficult to possess. It looks like this. Oops, I forgot the kusakamuri. Arigatai, okay? Arigatai. Thank you for the follow, Venks, too. Arigatai, okay? Arigatai, it like, literally speaking, it means it's difficult to have something. I mean, we don't really, these days, if you say arigatai, you still mean it as sort of like thankfulness. Usually you can use this sort of like an adjective version of arigato. For example, you can have some like arigatai mono or whatever, which is like a thing that you're thankful for. Arigatai mono or whatever. So you can kind of use it like the adjective version of arigato, which it is. I mean, it literally is that. So it's like something you're thankful for. It's the way it's used. It's not really used for is difficult to have, at least not in translation. From arigatai, we actually get a conjunctive form, which is arigataku. Okay, arigataku. This is the conjunctive, or the adverbial, and there is a sound change that happens that turns taku into to. Okay, so basically from arigataku, we get arigatai. Yeah, arigatai, arigataku, arigato. We end up with like arigato. Actually, I'm not quite sure which part. Let me see. Oh right, I can't type kanji in here for some reason. In kanji, yeah, okay, you do actually just change the ending. So in kanji, it looks like this. This sound change, it's called uonbin, if you want to look it up. I've been obsessed with uonbin in the past for a bit because it like makes everything sound fancy. But this process from arigataku to arigato is called uonbin. It is a sound change where like K sounds turn into like O sounds basically. So it turns into arigato. Arigato. It is grammatically equivalent to arigataku, which is also why you can add gozaimasu to both of these. Gozai. Oh god, I'm running out of space. Gozaimasu, okay? You can add gozaimasu to both of these, and that is grammatically correct. You cannot add gozaimasu to arigatai, okay? That is not grammatically correct. Because you cannot add a verb to an e-adjective. So the same reason why you can't say like oishii taberu or something, the same reason you also can't say arigatai gozaimasu. You cannot add a verb to an e-adjective. You can add a verb to an adverb, so arigataku gozaimasu is grammatically correct. Since arigato is a sound-changed version of arigataku, you can add gozaimasu to arigato. This is the grammar explanation for why arigato gozaimasu is actually a grammatically correct sentence. That's it, okay? That's how you get from gatai to arigato. That's it. It's weirdly complicated. You don't need to know this. It's interesting. It's an interesting bit of like somewhat recent language history, I guess. For the most part, you just need to know that arigato means thank you, or means like is how you express gratefulness, and you need to know that you can add gozaimasu to it to make it polite or more polite. So yeah, there you go. But it really does come from ari combined with gatai. That's pretty cool. I've always wondered how arigatai was supposed to be used. Do you have another sense? Arigatai mono. It's kind of you can kind of when you want to, because arigatai is just like an adjective, right? So you can describe anything with it, like your feeling, right? You could describe your feelings with arigatai as well. It's really hard to pinpoint what the exact difference in usage is because it's basically the same, but if people say like arigatai, they'll say like arigatai kimochi o. So for example, if you wanted to express your feelings of gratitude, they may say something like arigatai kimochi o, or arigataki kimochi, arigatai kimochi o arawasu tame ni, or something like that, for the sake of expressing my feelings of thankfulness. That would be maybe a way to use it. It's kind of hard, but you'll see it around in places. So yeah. Arigataku kanjitemasu. Yeah, so that would be another one. People sometimes use arigatai adverbially to sort of it sounds a bit, yeah, so it's that specific one. I'm not sure if I've heard, but I've seen ones like arigataku something. So sometimes people use it like adverbially to say that they are doing an action like thankfully. It's kind of tricky, but if you see it around, you will recognize it probably. Sure, thankful and give these maybe like in English. I got you these gifts. Yeah. ありがたい気持ちを表すためにありがたい気持ちを込めてこれをあげます。That would be fine, I think. With my feelings of gratitude, I give you this, kind of like that. I think that would work. I feel like ありがたい気持ち is something that I hear. Would be a specific thing. So yeah. Okay, let's do a little roundup of that, and then I think we can call a lesson there and move on to the next thing. So, real quick, ありがたく頂戴いたします. Yeah, people use it for like receiving things. They're like ありがたく頂戴いたします. That means like, well, 頂戴する here means to ask for something. So basically, ありがたく頂戴いたします means I gratefully request of this. I gratefully request this of you, or something like that. You could probably just say ありがたく受けて差し上げます or something. Wait, that doesn't make any sense. Wait, 受けていただく is also weird. I guess something like もらいます or いただきます would work. ありがたくいただきます. I'm not sure about that one. But anyways, ありがたい and ありがたく are like some very specific words that you see in some kind of specific situations. But yeah, So unusual in English, but in Japanese it makes sense. Yeah, I feel like it makes sense if you just think about like how would I use arigato as an adjective, and you're like, okay. I don't know. Reminds me of a question I heard. Arigataki shiawase. Ki, we're gonna talk about it, but I want to end the lesson first. It's not a very difficult question to answer though. First, we have. I just want to say like real quick what we talked about. So we have yasui means easy. We have nikui means difficult, more objectively. Okay, and we have zurai, which is difficult but more subjectively difficult. Okay, so those are the ones, right? Easy, yasui for easy, nikui for difficult, zurai for difficult. This one's more objective, this one's more subjective. That's basically it. These attach to the must stem, and that's how you can phrase how something is either difficult or easy to do for you. Right, that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Originally, like I said, I planned to talk about sugiru, but I think we spent enough time now and talked about yasui, nikui, zurai, and it's probably a good place to leave it for today. So yeah, 簡単でしょ? 簡単なんでしょ? Yeah, there you go. 簡単 obviously also means easy, but here it's purely as an adjective. So yeah. Also, 簡単 is like trivial, whereas yasui is like easy, where these can be, sometimes they can be the same thing, by the way, but yeah. All right. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in chat. I'll also get to Semi's question right now, but I will end the recording here. I'll hopefully see all of you people watching the recording in the next one.